In my 7 years on Scratch, I've earned hundreds of thousands of views, created a game that hit #1 on trending, and led a team of programmers to win the biggest game jam in Scratch history. Now I've compiled those years of experience into a complete beginner's guide to help anyone go from knowing nothing to confidently making games in Scratch. In this video, I'll give you the foundation you need to start your programming journey so that you can create your own projects while actually understanding the code instead of just copying it. I also wanted to mention that this video is just the first module of my full course, where we cover intermediate and advanced Scratch coding as well. So if you enjoy what you are learning here, please consider checking it out. But now, let's start coding our first game. As you can see on screen, we have a fully functional Pong game. You have a paddle and you can control it with your mouse. You use the paddle to hit the ball so that it doesn't fall into the lava. In this module, we will be creating this same exact Pong game. This is all assuming that you have no prior knowledge of Scratch, but if you've already started your Scratch journey, I highly recommend that you still follow along with me. This will give you a refresher, and you might learn something new that you missed. So without further ado, let's start coding. Hello, and welcome to Lesson 1 of Module 1. So today, we're just going to start off very simple and basic, and we're going to be doing 4 things. Number 1, we are going to be finding the Scratch website. Number 2, we're going to be making our Scratch account. Number 3, we're going to go over some of the basic pages and features of the Scratch website. And number 4, we're going to actually start creating a bit of our first project and first bits of code. Let's just start by finding the Scratch website. So in your search browser, just search up Scratch. And the first result is what you want to click on, scratch.mit.edu. So it'll bring you to a website that looks like this. Now that we've found the Scratch website, let's create a Scratch account. You can do this by clicking on this Join Scratch button up here. It now brings you to this form, and if you just fill this out, you'll have your account ready and set up. I actually already have my own account, so I'll just sign into that instead of making a new account. Alright, now that you've made your account, let's just go over some of the basics of the Scratch website. I want to start by talking about the homepage of Scratch. What you're looking at right now is the homepage. You can access it by clicking on this Scratch logo up here. And it just shows you some featured projects and what's going on in the Scratch community. The next page I want to talk about is the trending page, or the explore page. You can find it by clicking on this explore button, and over here you can see the most popular projects on Scratch right now. At the time of recording this video, the trending page is broken, so these aren't the most recent projects, but hopefully by the time that you're watching this, trending is fixed and you can see some pretty cool projects and get some inspiration for your own games. The next page I want to talk about is the My Stuff page. You can find it by clicking on this folder over here. Now, the My Stuff page is basically just a library that has all the projects that you've made on your Scratch account. I've been using my Scratch account for quite some time now, so I have quite a few projects stacked up, but if you've just made your account, you probably don't have any projects. The last page I want to talk about is your profile page. You can find it by selecting on this drop-down and clicking Profile. Your profile is basically just your own personal page where you can show off everything that you do in Scratch. So your shared projects, your favorite projects, the people you're following, and your followers, and even more. So this is a pretty fun page to just play around with. Okay, but now that we've gone over kind of the basics of the Scratch website, let's start creating our first project and first bits of code. To start, click this Create button, and we are now brought into the Scratch coding interface. This is where we will be creating all of our projects in Scratch. There's quite a lot of things that are on the screen, but we can break down basically everything that we're seeing into 4 basic parts. The first section I want to talk about is this block library. So this just includes a variety of different blocks, and these blocks are going to be the code that we use to create our games. The second part I want to talk about is this huge blank area over here. This is where we'll be basically formulating and actually creating our code. The third section I want to talk about is this viewing area over here. So this is where we can play our Scratch projects and see things being run. To start our projects, you click the green flag. To stop our projects, you hit the stop sign. And there's also a full screen button. The fourth section I want to talk about is the sprites pane. Sprites are basically the different characters or objects that you have in your Scratch projects. Right now, I have only one sprite called Sprite1, and it's this cat. But as you create more complicated projects in Scratch, you're going to end up using more sprites. So we use the sprites pane to manage and switch between different sprites. Okay, now let's actually start coding. Go up to Motion and just bring out a Move 10 Steps block. This is the first block of the block library. Now, if we hit this script, so just click it, you'll see that just like its name suggests, we're going to be moving 10 steps forward. So this block does exactly what its name says. And this is actually kind of the beauty of Scratch. Everything is basically just like plain English. So you can basically find out what every single block does just by looking at its name. And that's what makes coding in Scratch so fun and so easy. Okay, but how about we now start trying to add in some more code? Go down to the look section and bring out a say hello for 2 seconds block. And if you click on it, then you'll notice that we say hello. But what if I want to move 10 steps and say hello? To do this, we can just combine these blocks. And now if we hit this chunk of code, we move 10 steps and say hello. So the way you make more complex scripts in Scratch is by combining these blocks of code and making your own programs. But remember how I was actually talking about this green flag earlier and how it's used to start our Scratch projects? If we click it right now, you'll notice that nothing happens and our cat doesn't move 10 steps, it doesn't say hello, it just stays exactly where it is. So let's try to fix this. In the events section, bring out a when green flag clicks block and put it at the top of our scripts. This block is one of the Scratch blocks that you're going to be using the most. We basically use the when green flag click block to start all of our projects. Now hit the green flag and you'll see that our code begins to run. So we move 10 steps and say hello every single time we hit the green flag, which is really cool. So far we only discussed 3 blocks, but you can see that there's so many Scratch blocks in the block library. So on your own, I actually want you to just kind of experiment with some of these blocks, try to figure out what they do, and just play around with them. But that's going to be it for this lesson. And in the next lesson, we're going to be talking about forever loops, which are a really important coding concept and coding block in Scratch. So I'm excited to see you there. Congratulations on finishing lesson 1. I just wanted to take the time to remind you what you are watching right now is just a small part of my full Scratch course that teaches you how to become a master of Scratch. So while watching this video, if you like what you are learning, then click on the first link in the description or head over to Viiperrr.com. Thanks, and now on to lesson 2. Hello, welcome to lesson 2. In this lesson, I'm going to be teaching you about forever loops, which are basically essential for every Scratch game that you're ever going to make. Forever loops are also pretty simple, so this lesson is going to be a rather short one. So a forever loop is actually just a specific block in Scratch, and to locate it, go to the Control tab, and bring out this block that says forever on it. So right off the bat, one thing you might notice is that this block looks a little bit different from some of the other blocks that we've worked with previously. The main difference with it is its shape. So instead of being kind of a line, a straight line like these other 2 blocks, it has more of a C shape to it. And that's because we can actually put blocks inside of this forever loop. So we can, for example, take our move 10 steps and say hello for 2 seconds block and put it inside our forever loop. Now, how about we give this a run? Let's see what happens. So attach your scripts together like mine and hit the green flag. As you can see, instead of just moving 10 steps and saying hello for 2 seconds once like we used to, now, because we have a forever loop, we are forever constantly running these two scripts. So forever loops are just really useful if you ever want to have a piece of code or a lot of code just be constantly run without end. But actually, I want to tell you something that's really important and this can be really important moving forward when we're coding more complex projects in Scratch. And it's the order in which Scratch blocks are run. So you might think that Scratch blocks are all being run at the same time. So for example, this move 10 steps block and this say hello for 2 seconds block are being run exactly at the same time. However, that's not actually true. In Scratch, blocks move from top to bottom. So first, this move 10 steps block will be triggered because it's on top of the say hello block. And only after we move 10 steps is Scratch going to make the cat say hello for 2 seconds. So when we hit the green flag, you might not actually notice it. It looks like it's the same time, but technically this block is always going to be run before this block. So when you make bigger Scratch projects later on, the order of scripts actually is really important. But that's basically all I wanted to talk about for this lesson. Forever loops are pretty simple, but they're just so important. So I decided I just wanted to give them their own lesson. I'll see you in the next lesson where we're going to be talking about positioning and movement in Scratch. That'll be a little bit more complicated than what we discussed in this lesson, so I hope you're excited for that, and thank you for watching lesson 2. Hello and welcome to lesson 3. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about positioning and moving our sprites in Scratch. So in the previous lessons, we've moved our sprites by using the move 10 steps block, and we can also just move our cat by dragging him around, like this. But there's actually a much better and much more efficient way to move our sprites in Scratch, and that's by using X and Y. To put it simply, X just controls how far left or right you are on the screen, and Y controls how far up and down you are on the screen. The easiest way you can change your X and Y value is by changing these two values right over here. Let's just start by setting these both to 0. So set our X to 0 and also set our Y to 0. And what you'll see that this does is it'll place us at the dead center of the screen. But okay, how about we start talking about the X-axis first? Let's start by setting our X value to something like 50. And when you hit enter, you're going to notice that we moved 50 pixels to the right from the center of the screen. Now, let's try setting our X to something like 100, so an even bigger number than 50. And what you'll see this does is it moves us even farther to the right. So instead of just being 50 pixels from the center of the screen, we now move 100 pixels. But okay, so far we've only moved our cat towards the right side of the screen. What happens if we want to move our cat to the left? Well, that's actually pretty simple. Instead of using a positive number like 50 or 100, we can just use a negative number. So if I set my X to negative 70, then you'll see that we move 70 pixels to the left. And if we want to move even further to the left, just like we did on the X-axis, we can use a bigger number. So if I set my X to negative 100, we're going to move an additional few pixels to the left. But okay, now that we have the X-axis covered, let's start talking about the Y-axis. So to start off, let's just set our X back to 0 so that we have a clean slate. And now, what I want you to do is set our Y to 50. This is pretty similar to the X-axis, and what we just did is move up 50 pixels from the center of the screen. And if we change this to a larger value, just like the X-axis, we're going to move up even higher. But now, what if we want to move down? What do you think we need to do? If you said use a negative number, you'd be correct. So let's say we set our Y to like negative 100, then we're going to move 100 pixels down. So it's really that simple, and this is just how you're going to be using X and Y in Scratch. In this lesson so far, we've just gone over how positioning and moving our sprites work. Let's start to actually try making some code now. Let's start off by deleting these scripts from the previous lesson. And instead, let's go to Events and bring out a when key pressed block. And instead of space, select the dropdown and select right arrow. Now go up to motion and bring out a change XY block. And you'll see that the default value here is 10. Now what I want you to do is just click the right arrow and see what happens. So I'm clicking the right arrow key right now, and my scratch cat is now moving towards the right, which is exactly what we wanted to happen. But now let's try doing the same thing, but for the left arrow key. So let's duplicate our scripts, and you can do that by right-clicking the script and just clicking duplicate. And let's set this value to be left arrow. And since we want to go to the left, instead of using positive 10, let's set this value to be negative 10. And now, when you hit the left arrow key, we're going to move left. And the right arrow key still works. So now we have left and right movement. But what if we want to move up and down? Well, let's once again duplicate our script. And let's set this when key press condition to be checking for the up arrow key. But one thing that you'll notice is that this is a change XY block. And if we want to move our scratch cat up or down, we need to change our Y position, not our X position. So get rid of this block right here and replace it with a change Y by block. Right now, this default value is 10, and I'll just leave it at that. Now let's duplicate one more time for the down arrow key, and let's select the drop down to be checking for the down arrow. And let's change our Y by negative 10 to make sure that we're going down. Now, if we try going in any direction, we can move left, we can move down, we can move right, we can move up. So everything is working perfectly now. And that's actually it for this lesson. We've now gone over basically how to position our sprites in Scratch, and we've also made a pretty cool movement script just now. In the next lesson, we're actually going to start working on our Pong game by making the paddle. I hope you're excited for that, and thank you for watching lesson 3. Hello and welcome to lesson 4, where we're going to be making the paddle for our Pong game. So the first thing that I want to do is just kind of set up our project. So let's just delete all these scripts from the previous lesson. Okay, and now what I want to do is add in the paddle art for our game. Because right now, this cat does not look very much like a paddle. The way that we can change the art of our sprites in Scratch is by going to the Costumes tab. And once we're here, this is where we'll start designing our paddle. So you'll notice that there's a lot of tools in this editor. So there's this paintbrush tool, there's this text tool, there's a line tool, there's a circle tool, there's a rectangle tool, there's an eraser, and there's just a lot of stuff in general. But since our paddle is going to be pretty much a rectangle shape, I think that it makes most sense to be using the rectangle tool. But to start off by deleting our scratch cat and any of these other drawings, click on this mouse tool and select delete. And this will give us a blank slate. Now what I want us to do is first select this outline dropdown and click this button right over here. What this does is makes it so that we have no outline for our drawings. So right now if I draw a rectangle, there's no black border that surrounds this shape. Okay, but anyways, now what I want you to do is select a fill color that you like. You can do that by messing around with the color, saturation, and brightness. So I've come up with this color that I like right over here. So I'm just going to use this to create a paddle. So I'm going to draw a rectangle and just edit the shape until I have something I like. So I'm pretty happy with the shape that I just created. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this paddle and I'm going to make sure that it's centered on the middle of our sprite by making these two crosses line up. And you'll feel a snap, and that means that your sprite is now centered. And also your paddle doesn't need to look exactly like mine, but just as a general rule of thumb, keeping it something similar to this would be pretty nice. But okay, now that we have our art, let's go back into the code section and let's make the code that will actually move the paddle to our mouse. So go to events and bring out a when green flag click block. Now go into control and bring out a forever loop. Now go up to motion and bring out a go to block. Right now this is set to random position, but let's change that to be mouse pointer. So this script that we just created simply makes it so that we are constantly going to be going to our mouse. So if we hit the green flag, you're going to see that that does in fact work, and the paddle is now always following our mouse. But there is a slight problem with this, and it's that we want our paddle to be moving left and right, but we don't want our paddle to be moving up and down like this. So how can we fix this? Well, click the stop sign, and let's actually get rid of this go to mouse pointer block. Instead, we need to find a script that only changes our X position. Also in the motion category, bring out a set X2 block. And now go down to sensing and bring out a mouse X block and put it inside of this hole. So now what this script does is always just sets our X position to be wherever our mouse is, which is exactly what we wanted. So let's click the green flag to test if our scripts will now work. So hit the green flag, and you'll see, yes, our Pong paddle now does not move up and down, and it only moves left and right. But okay, we have one more problem, and it's that this paddle is stuck towards the top of the screen, and the paddle is actually supposed to be towards the bottom of the screen. So how can we fix this? Well, that's actually pretty simple. Go up to motion and bring out a go to XY block and add it to the top of our scripts. So what this block will do is just set our sprite's position to a specific point on the screen immediately when the green flag is clicked. Let's set the X to be 0 so that we're at the center of the screen. And because we want to be more towards the bottom of the screen, let's use a negative number such as -150. And now if we hit the green flag, you'll see that our Pong paddle is towards the bottom of the screen. And -150 as the Y seems pretty good for me. Your paddle will probably look slightly different from mine, so don't feel pressured to use the exact values that I'm using. And let's say that you think the paddle should be a little bit more up, then you don't need to use -150 necessarily. So just keep that in mind. But anyways, yeah, that's it for this lesson. We have now created the paddle for our Pong game, which is the perfect start for this project. In the next lesson, lesson 5, we're going to start progress on the ball for our Pong game. I hope you're excited for that, and I will see you there. Alright, you've now made it around halfway through the Pong module. I hope you found this helpful so far and you have learned something new. If that's the case, then I'd love for you to see what's in store in my full 8-module course. There we go over more than just the basics of Scratch, and we go really in depth on how to make your own advanced games. So why not give it a try? Hello and welcome to lesson 5. In this lesson, we're going to be making the ball for our Pong game. So because the ball is completely separate from our paddle, let's start by creating a new sprite. So hover over this drop down over here and click on this magnifying glass. This will bring us to the Scratch costume library, which has a bunch of pre-made sprites that we can use in our projects. What I want us to do is select on this ball sprite over here. So select it, and we now have our ball in our game. And I think it looks pretty nice. But actually, there's one thing I want to do real quick, and it's, first of all, renaming our project from Untitled to Pong, and also go into Sprite 1, and rename it to Paddle. So this is just so that we don't get confused later on. Okay, but now let's start adding in the code for our ball. In the events category, bring out a when green flag click block. And now go to control and bring out a forever loop. And now go up to motion and bring out a move 10 steps block. So this script of code will just forever move us 10 steps. So pretty self-explanatory. Let's just hit the green flag to see what happens. Yep, just like we expected, our ball is now moving to the right 10 steps every single frame. But this is kind of boring. The ball just goes to the right side and it just gets stuck on the very right side of the screen and it never bounces. So we need to make it so that when the ball hits an edge, it doesn't just stop, but instead it turns around. And there's actually a very specific block that we can use for this. It can also be found in the motion category, and it's the if on edge bounce block. So add it to our forever loop, and now hit the green flag. And you'll see that our scripts are now nicely working and that the ball is moving left and right. But now we've run into another problem, and it's that this ball is only just moving left and right and it doesn't move up and down, so it's no fun for us. And the way that we can fix this is by bringing out a point in direction block from the motion category. And now actually the reason why we're using a move 10 steps block in the first place is because it's not dependent on X and Y, and instead it's direction dependent. So in whatever direction we're facing, that's where the ball will move. So let's set this direction to be something like 135. And now if you hit the green flag, you'll see that our ball is now bouncing up and down and left and right. It's going in every single direction. So now our code is fixed. But before we end off our lesson, there's one more thing I want to do. And that's resetting our ball's position to a specific point, to a specific spot when we hit the green flag. Because right now, if we start the game, the ball will just pick off wherever it last left off. So let's say we end our game and the ball is right here. When we hit the green flag, the ball is going to start back right over here. And that's not what we want. So add in a go to XY block and add it to the top of our scripts. Let's set our X to 0 because we want to be in the center of the screen. And let's set our Y to 80. Now hit the green flag. And our ball always starts in the same exact position, which is perfect. So now we always can predict where the ball is going to be. So it's not too much of a shock and we don't need to just like instantly readjust to try to look for where the ball is. And that's it for this lesson. In lesson 6, the next lesson, we're going to be talking about if conditions. If conditions are one of the most important things that you'll ever learn about coding. So I hope you're excited for that and I will see you there. So in this lesson, because we are going to be experimenting with if conditions, let's make a new project so we don't have to worry about accidentally breaking our Pong scripts. So just go to your My Stuff page and just click Create. Okay, we've now made a new project. To find an if condition, go to the control section and bring out this block right here. Right off the bat, you'll notice that its shape looks a little bit like the forever loop, where it's kind of like a C shape. So that means that we can put blocks inside of here. And something else that you'll find interesting about this if then block is that there's this little diamond shape over here. And this diamond shape is used for what are known as conditionals. And you can think of conditionals as kind of like questions. And if the answer to the question is yes, or if the condition is true, then whatever code is inside of here will be run. So as an example, go to operators and bring out an equal sign block. And also from operators, bring out this plus sign block. And let's just write out 1 plus 1 equals 2. And now, just as a test, go back up to motion and put in a move 10 steps block inside of our if then condition. But before we actually run this script, I just want to give you a quick question. What do you think will happen when we click this block? Do you think that we're going to move 10 steps? Or do you think that nothing is going to happen? Well, let's just click this chunk of code to find out. You'll see that we actually do move 10 steps. That's because, obviously, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. But now, what if we were to do something like 1 plus 1 equals 3? Would this move 10 steps block still run, or would nothing happen? Now let's click our code, and you'll see that no matter how many times we click this, because 1 plus 1 is not equal to 3, nothing happens. And this is pretty much it for if conditions. This is the basic logic of how they work. And although they look very simple, if conditions are really important in Scratch and just real coding in general, and they can help you to make some really amazing things. So now that we know the basics of if conditions, we're going to be using them in the next lesson where we're going to be talking about how we can make our ball bounce off the paddle. I'll see you there, and I hope you're excited for that. Hello and welcome to lesson 7. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about ball collisions in our Pong game. So when we play our Pong game right now, everything looks relatively okay, but whenever the ball comes into contact with the paddle like right now, you'll notice that the ball just goes through the paddle, and that's not what we want happening. So we're going to be dedicating this lesson to fixing this. So let's start by going into the ball sprite. Let's go to control and bring out an if condition. And because we want to make it so that the ball will turn around every time we touch the paddle, the condition for our if condition should be from sensing, touching, sprite 1, or the paddle. I'm actually going to rename this sprite paddle just so that we don't get confused. So you might actually want to rename this sprite paddle. And also while we're at it, let's just rename the project to Pong. If you haven't already done that, you can do that by going up here. But yeah, anyways, back in the ball sprite, we now have our if touching paddle script, but now we need to add code inside of our if condition to make it so that we turn around. Now you may be wondering what block we can use to make it so that our ball goes in the complete opposite direction. And there's actually a very simple way to do this. So go up to motion and bring out a turn block. So this block right here. Now, right now, the default value is 15, but I'm just going to tell you right off the bat that 15 is not the number that we want. You may have heard for you to go in a full rotation, you need 360 degrees. So we need half of 360 if we want to make half of a rotation, or in other words, turn in the complete opposite direction. And half of 360 is 180. So let's set our value to 180 degrees. Now, if we add a when green flag click block to the top of our scripts and try playing our project, you're going to notice that surprisingly, nothing changes. Even though we added the if touching paddle, it seems that nothing has changed whatsoever and the ball still goes through the paddle. That's because the script we just made is only being run directly when we hit the green flag. So when the green flag is clicked, we're just going to check once if we're touching the paddle, and after that, it's not going to check multiple times. So to fix this, let's just go to control and bring out a forever loop and put it over this script. Now, if we hit the green flag, you'll see that our Pong code is working exactly like how we want it to. So every single time the ball hits the paddle, it turns 180 degrees in the opposite direction, and we have kind of like a fun little Pong game now. So that's it for this lesson. We just created some very simple code today, and hopefully you can now see how if conditions can be used in some very helpful ways for our projects. In the next lesson, we're going to be talking about losing the game when the ball makes it to the bottom of the screen. I'll see you there, and I hope you're excited for that. Hello, in today's lesson, we're going to make it so that our player can die. So the way that you die in a game of Pong is if you miss the ball, and let's say, for example, oops, I missed the ball, and the ball touches the bottom of the screen. So to start off, let's just create a danger sprite that we can position on the bottom of the screen to check if the ball is ever touching it. So over here, hover over, choose a sprite, and let's actually just paint a sprite this time. Let's name the sprite Dangers, and using the rectangle tool, set the fill color to red because this is danger, and set the outline to nothing. And now let's just draw a rectangle like this, and just try to match it so where it's below the paddle. I think this looks pretty good for me. So I'm just going to keep my dangers like this. Now that we created the art for our danger sprite, let's actually start coding. So in the ball sprite, just add an if condition to this chunk of code over here and just make it so that if touching dangers, then from control, we're going to stop all. And this stop all block, basically, as its name suggests, just stops the entire project. So now if we hit the green flag and we just play the game and oops, we accidentally mess up and the ball touches the lava or the dangers, we're going to notice that the paddle no longer follows us, the ball is no longer bouncing, and the game just stops. And that's pretty much it for stopping the game and making it so that we can lose and die in our Pong game. This was actually a really short lesson, but in the next one, we're going to be talking about variables, which are really important for coding in general. And if there's anything that I really want you to take away from this course, it's going to be variables. So I hope you're excited for that, and thank you for watching. Hello, welcome to lesson 9. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about variables in Scratch. If there's one thing that I want you to learn from this course, it's going to be variables, so I really recommend that you pay attention to what I'm about to teach you. So let's actually just start by going back to our test project, just so that we don't mess up any of our existing scripts over here. So click Save Now to make sure that our project is saved, and let's just go to our test project. Let's start off by going into the variables section. So variables are so important that Scratch decided that they should have their own category. And right now you see very few blocks, but these blocks are very, very powerful. So the simplest way to think of a variable is just a value with a name attached to it. So right now we have this pre-made variable called myVariable, and you can click this checkbox to make it visible. So right now, there's a value, which is 0, and there's a name attached to it, which is myVariable. And that's it. But what if we don't want myVariable to be 0, and we want it to be a bigger value or a smaller value? To do that, we can use these two blocks, the setMyVariable block and the changeMyVariable block. So if we click on the changeMyVariable block, then we can change our variable by increments. So right now, since this value is set to 1, we change our value by 1 every single time. But let's just say that we want to set our variable to a specific value. So what if we want myVariable to be 1,000? Then you can just type 1,000 and click this set block. And now our variable will automatically update. So that is pretty cool. And the way that you create a new variable is by clicking on this Make a Variable button. And you can use this to create a new variable, and we can call it like name, for example. And now let's actually hide the myVariable variable so we don't get confused. And I want to actually show you something else that you can do with variables. So instead of just using numbers, you can also set your variable to letters or words or sentences. So let's select this dropdown and select name, and just put your name inside of this slot over here. And now if we click our variable, you'll see that the value of your variable is now your name. So that's just something else to keep in mind. And one more thing I want to say about variables is that their names do not affect the code itself. So if I have a variable called age and I have a variable called cow, both these variables can be used in the same exact way, and their name doesn't change anything about the code themselves. The only reason why you want to have a specific name for a variable is just so that you don't get confused and that your code can stay organized. But anyways, that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, lesson 10, we're going to be finishing off this module by creating the score for our Pong game. Thank you for watching. Hello, welcome to lesson 10, the final lesson of this module. Today, we are going to be creating a score for our Pong game. Now, this is actually very, very simple. So let's just go to the ball sprite and go to the variable section. And let's start off just by deleting this myVariable variable because we are not going to need it. So just right click it and click delete. And now let's make a new variable and call it score because we want to keep track of our score, right? So now what I want us to do is add a set score to 0 block to the top of this script over here. So what this does is just resets our score to 0 every single time we restart our project. And now what I want us to do is bring out a change score by 1 block and add it to this if touching paddle condition. So now we're going to change our score by 1 every single time we touch the paddle. And now if we click the green flag to test out our project, you're going to see that our score does increase by 1 every single time the ball touches the paddle. And now our Pong game is actually complete. You could stop right here, or you could experiment with some other things. For example, what if you change the background of the game? What if you make the ball go faster? Or what if you add in another paddle? So there's just a lot of things that you can do, and I really recommend that you just try out a little bit of coding by yourself and see what you can create. But anyways, that's it for this lesson and for our Pong game. Thank you for watching. Congratulations, you have now finished the first module of this course and have created your first Scratch project. I hope you are excited for the next module where we're going to be taking things up a notch and creating a Catch the Apple game. I'll see you there. Now that you've completed this Pong game, you have a basic understanding of Scratch and you have the perfect foundation for moving forward. And I'd love to be the one to guide you in what's next to come. The best way I can do that is through the complete Scratch guide. Once again, you can find it by heading over to Viiperrr.com or clicking on the first link in the description. Give it a try, and I know you'll love it.
Yeah.